Good morning, everybody, from chilly Melbourne. Another day and another really exciting company that we're going to talk about today. But before that, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. People are having trouble understanding markets, what's going on. S&P, NASDAQ got an all-time high. But one area I think people do understand are metals. People understand that you can look, touch, feel them. They're a source of value. So people get that. And our job is to bring to you maybe not so well-known ways to play these various investments. And one of the ways could be Arrow Minerals, a gold explorer in Africa. And we're lucky enough to have with us today Howard Golden, the managing director of the company, obviously via Zoom, not in person, but we look forward to seeing you in person very soon, Howard. Anyway, with that introduction, Howard, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets.
Thanks very much, and thanks for mentioning right off the bat that we are a source of value. Appreciate that.
Howard, I always love to start out with people's backgrounds and their stories. And maybe I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get to where you are today?
I have what might be called a bit of a checkered past. I have a degree in, I actually have a degree in social sciences in addition to geophysics. I spent about 17 years with BHP, and since then I've worked with some of the majors, including Western Mining, Rio Tinto, and Nord Gold. In fact, most recently, until about 2 years ago, I was living in Moscow for about 4 years with Nord Gold, working both in Russia and Kazakhstan, but also in West Africa. So I've been sort of around the world, and I have a few languages under my belt, and a lot of terrains under my belt, and a lot of different. I've seen a lot of management styles in my day as well, and I've been very privileged actually to be involved in a few interesting projects. The Agba project, in fact, in Ivory Coast, that we found in about 30 years ago with BHP. Also with BHP, I was involved in the early days of discovering Oyu Tolgoi, which when you say that, everybody thinks Robert Friedland. Sadly, I was gone from their project long before Robert Friedland got involved. But it was still one of the most interesting projects I've ever been involved in. And since then, I've spent a lot of time in West Africa. And when I had the opportunity to work with some people who had these projects in Burkina Faso, I jumped at the chance. And when then we were looking for a vehicle and merged with a company called Arrow Minerals that had some Western Australia projects. And that's a pretty brief way of telling you where I am now. So I joined in August, this last August, about 7 months ago, I guess, sure. Arrow Minerals. We've rejigged the management and our portfolio, and now we've got our projects in, both kinds of WA, West Africa and Western Australia.
Well, that is certainly, I must say, I speak to quite a number of mining executives that have global experience, but yours is truly incredible. I'd be remiss, can I not at least ask about how was it dealing in Moscow for 4 years?
I have to say that without any apologies for obvious problems in Russia, it was a fantastic place to live. It was fascinating, it was beautiful. Food, culture. Moscow has a fantastic mass transit system. And of course, the people in Russia, again, we get a very distorted view of us, but they were just lovely people. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic, fantastic. And now, obviously, you mentioned before that, your focus now is more on Western Africa and Western Australia, but maybe we'll touch on West Africa first. Can you describe, we understand, I think a lot of viewers, that it is a prolific gold region, but can you just give us a little bit more context, in layman's terms about the region, please?
Sure. There's a kind of rocks called the Birimian terrain in West Africa. It's about 2 billion years old and is tremendously prolific, particularly in view of gold endowment. And some of the countries for example, Burkina Faso, where we are, 12 years ago, there were no operating mines there. There are now, if I have it right, 14 operating mines and 2 under construction. And it's really just absolutely skyrocketed. It's Burkina is the 18th largest gold producer worldwide, and the region is fantastic. In fact, I believe Endeavour Mining, who just recently merged with Semafo in West Africa, just put out a bit of an article, and they were very bullish, and they said, I can't remember the exact words, but basically they said this was the most prospective terrain in the world for gold. So it's West Africa is a really good place to be.
Right. Okay. So it is very prolific. You're not the first person there, which sometimes is almost a benefit, but it sounds like that the market there is wide open. Is that accurate?
We're not the first people there at all, but I should mention, and I'll give credit where credit is due. I have a colleague named Ed Baltus, very experienced, rather well-known geologist in this part of the world, who did all the targeting in West Africa for us. And every one of our projects was a new license that we picked up. We didn't have any discards from any other companies. They were all new project based on good, sound geological targeting. And so far, we've been very successful with it.
Right. Okay. And then also, I suppose with the new technology in mining has changed so much, even in the last 10 years. Do you feel that that is a really point of differentiation with, you have a new area, new technology that, really the stars are lining up, so to speak?
Well, technologies in terms of geochemical analysis with lower detection limits is certainly helping us. And the other thing, of course, that has really helped, gold in general, but also West Africa particularly, is processing, being able to economically process much lower grades of gold. So now there are deposits throughout West Africa, some of them getting in sub-gram per ton grades that are making money. So I think that perhaps is some of the best technology that's helped us.
Right. Fantastic. And then maybe, can you just drill into a little bit more, your specific locations within Burkina Faso and, what, in your opinion, makes them really exciting?
Okay, well, let's start geographically. Our projects are in the central and southwest part of the country. And that's really important because whenever you talk about Burkina Faso, the elephant in the room is always the security situation. And there are issues up in the northeast on the Mali and Niger border that we're well aware of and take very seriously, and we have taken measures to make sure that we can work safely. But the good news is, where we are, things are really quite calm, and we work very closely with communities to make sure that we have, on the one hand, good intelligence, but more importantly, good relationship with our neighbors and people in the regions in which we're working. And we are taking active steps as well as, of course, employing local people and working with our communities. For example, we just finished building a nurses' accommodation for a local clinic there, which in the days of COVID-19, the health outcomes for the community is more important than ever. So we're pleased to be part of that. And the best way to make sure that you can work safely and securely in any environment, but particularly in West Africa, is to have a good relationship with the community. So that's sort of where we are there, so geographically. So we're in a good part of Burkina Faso. From a geological perspective, we're near major structures in these Birimian terrains that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And in one of our areas particularly, called Bassa, we've made a discovery this last January.
Fantastic. And, speaking of the, infrastructure in the area, as I understand it, they've spent about $200 million in general infrastructure. How does that fit into, your specific locations?
Generally pretty well. There we're still have to do a few kilometers off road, but right. The sealed roads are close to all of our projects. Some go right through the projects. The most recent major project that the Burkina Faso government completed was power lines to a lot of communities, and that goes way up north. And we find that infrastructure is pretty good. I mean, it's probably as easy as getting to the remote areas of Western Australia.
Okay, so that's a huge factor. And then,
Sure, that makes it easy.
maybe this is running a little bit too far in advance, but what do you see as far as um, you know, costings? Like, where would you fit into the cost curve, or and and mine designs? But again, it may be just a little bit too early days for that. But if you would touch on it, that'd be great.
Uh, yeah, well, there are a couple issues. One is that most of the mineralization that we found so far is in the superficial oxidized zones in the saprolite and laterite profiles. So these oxide zones are much easier to process. So we haven't done any metallurgy yet, but in principle, it should be quite in the low cost part of the processing range. But step back a second, I think what we have is a lot of optionality in Burkina Faso because there are a lot of mines nearby, which allows us to work possibly with other companies if we can define a big resource. For example, our Bulsa project, which is in the middle of the country, actually abuts West African Resources mining license. And of course, they just started producing about 3 months ago. So in some ways, that makes our life really easy because we have very good neighbors with infrastructure that's already running. So on the one hand, if we wanted to have a standalone operation, I think it would be relatively low cost. There are some very low cost operations in Burkina, but also we have potential partners as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me, that there's economies of scale in that general region, and it doesn't have to be just one person, winner take all, so to speak. It's such a vast, unexplored area. Is it safe to say that there probably could be a number of really fantastic companies that emerge out of this region over the next decade?
Oh, absolutely, and there already are. I mean, as I mentioned, the Endeavor Semafo merger is just happening now. The West African Resources, there's Rox Gold, who's a partner. They have an earning in one of our projects. They're a Canadian company, and of course, Nord Gold still has two mines in the country as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's, in my mind, massively important because it's very tough if the entire sector and an entire economy is going against you, that you're going to be that single one that makes it. Generally, when there's all you have to do is look at the internet as an example. There are tons and tons of winning companies out there. And I would say that, that's pretty much every sector or anything I've ever seen in my investment career. So that's fantastic. And also, it probably helps the government relations. I mean, it sounds like you're an absolute expert. I hate that term, but expert when it comes to dealing with foreign governments and with all your experience. But that could really be helpful as well. What would be within Burkina, from a news flow point of view, what are the next milestones that we should be on the lookout for?
Right. Well, that's where I think we're feeling pretty good about this. We have another month or so before the rains start. We're very susceptible to the rainy season in Burkina, which actually is one of our, because during the rainy season in Burkina, which we call the football season, is the cricket season in Western Australia. So we can work all year round. But I digress. In Burkina, we'll be drilling very soon there on Dasa, our discovery, to be able to fill it in because it's about a 3 kilometer long mineralized zone, but we have a gap in the middle. So we'll be drilling that. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, in fact, we'll be doing some auger and soils on our other 3 projects, hopefully generating drill targets that we'll be drilling then later in the year in the 4th quarter after the rain stop. So we'll be generating hopefully some good results throughout the rest of the calendar year. And as I say, and in between July and October, when the rains come, we'll be working back in Oz.
Right. So for our viewers, right now is really prime time before the rains. Is that a good way to say it?
Well, it has been for several months. And of course, for the last 2 or 3 months, we've been pretty much waiting to make sure that we can do things in a healthy and safe and compliant manner. So we are hoping to get back out very soon.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, turning from one WA to the other WA, your Western Australian portfolio, do you maybe want to just touch on that a little bit? It's getting lost in the shuffle, but with your stock, it's probably upside optionality 101.
Well, absolutely right. And this is the part that's really been a lot of fun for us. It's been, there aren't many upsides to a global pandemic, but the one thing that has helped us in this respect is the 1,000 square kilometers of ground in the greenstones, actually very similar greenstones in Western Australia to West Africa, except a billion years old, as it turns out. But we have a lot of data that Arrow, before we did our merger, before I was involved, the geologists there collected tens of thousands of data points with multi-element geochemistry. And we've had time to sit down with this data. And what emerged was 3 very coherent anomalies of base metals, elements such as copper, gold, silver, zinc, bismuth, barium, and this sort of cocktail of elements says to us that we have a good chance of turning up a volcanogenic hosted massive sulfide, they call them VMS deposits.
Yeah.
That, and this is sort of at the same time as we had this technical breakthrough, the timing is perfect because in the region there have been a couple of these things that have recently been found. Up north of us, there's a deposit called, or a discovery called Perrinvale, and one called Rover. These VMS deposits, they're very economically attractive. And we now have confirmation because of these other discoveries that the terrain is permissive. And of course, we have these indicator elements. So we're pretty excited. We want to get in there and do a little work here as well when the rain starts for overseas.
Right. And when you say that the VMS deposits are quite economical, can you just give us a little bit more about information about that, please?
Well, they're massive sulfides. So what these things are is they're just massive hunks of metal, really, and generally small-ish in terms of the total tonnage, but very high grade. They usually have a lot of copper and sometimes a lot of gold as well.
Right. So absolutely worthy of further exploration, if you will.
Worthy of further exploration, and they're fun to look for because they have geophysical signals, and they also have good geochemical signals. So they're fun from sort of the detective part of the story to do the exploration, because most of us do this obviously to add value to our shareholders, but we also do it because we love it. So it's fun exploration is better than not fun exploration.
I can appreciate that, and absolutely. And then, to explore all these projects, obviously we need capital to do it. You just did a small capital raising, quite recently. Can you just talk about the capital position, where we are, and the burn rate maybe, and just what are we looking for over the next, call it 6 to 12 months? It sounds like there's a lot there.
Right. Well, we first we'll do a little mea culpa. We did a capital raising the day that the ASX, global markets crashed when the COVID-19 pandemic was declared a pandemic. It was probably the worst day in 100 years to do a capital raising. But we actually got a few $100,000 together. It was great. We're solvent now, and we're moving ahead, and we're doing a lot of this analysis work. So that's good. And we have some about $300,000 worth of prepaid drilling that we've already paid for. So we're healthy, but of course we're looking forward to raising more money in the relatively near future as well, so we can get out and do some big enough projects to actually prove out these discoveries that we have. So that's where we are. We have right now. We have about $700,000 worth of cash and prepaid drilling. So we're feeling like on the back of one more raising as we go forward, we can move forward and do some real damage out in the field.
Right. And are you trying to maybe get some results out into the market before you do that second round, like just the classic, you want to tell your story in the best light possible? Or I should say.
Very good question. We're just circling around that decision right now.
Yeah. And I'll leave, obviously with disclosure issues, whatever it may be, you may be in a certain state of mind, and that's fantastic. In conclusion, is there anything you want to leave leave our viewers with? I mean, I certainly feel like that. To me, the biggest takeaway that Western Africa is certainly an area that we should be paying a lot more attention to, as far as just general mineral discovery. But is there something further you'd like to add?
Well, only that you're right. In terms of jurisdictions, West Africa is a great place to be technically, and in terms of things like mining law, taxation, security of tenure, a very good place to be. Western Australia, you don't really need to talk much about that. It's obviously a secure place to be,
Hopefully we
and
know it.
tremendously endowed. But we have. I just want to mention something I think I've left out, and that is we have a great team on the ground in West Africa, and they're staying employed and engaged and paid during during this period, and they're just champing at the bit to go ahead. And we also have good technical people here that we're using, and I think with the good technical application and a sound financial backing, I think that we have a very good chance of showing some really good results in the coming 6 to 12 months.
Fantastic, Howard. Well, again, thank you very much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to seeing the results over the next, from now and over the next 180 days. And we're happy to share this journey with you.
Great. Thanks very much for talking to me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.